I want to ask you something before I start. Have you ever been completely alone in a large building at night? Not like your family is asleep upstairs. I mean truly alone, where the nearest person is a quarter-mile away, where every sound the building makes bounces off empty walls and empty floors and comes back to you changed, where the lights only reach so far and beyond them is just dark. If you have, then you already know the particular feeling I'm talking about. That low, constant hum of awareness, that part of your brain that never fully relaxes, that feeling like the building itself is breathing around you. I did night security for 3 years, mostly uneventful, mostly long, quiet shifts in empty buildings where nothing happened and I drank bad coffee and watched the clock. Mostly. What happened to me on the 14th floor of the Hargrove Building in downtown Cincinnati on a Tuesday night in November will stay with me until I die. And I've never told this story in full, because the part that scares me most isn't what I saw, it's what I heard. I started working nights at Hargrove in the spring of that year. 18-story office building, corporate tenants, law firms, an insurance company, a financial group on the top 3 floors. During the day, it was busy, elevators running constantly, people everywhere. After 7 p.m., it was a different building. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 8 hours, just me and the building. My routine was the same every night. I'd check in at the front desk, review the security monitors, do a walk of the lobby and parking structure at 10:30, then floors 1 through 9 from 11 p.m. to midnight, then floors 10 through 18 from midnight to 1 a.m. After that, desk until 3, then one more full walk, then desk until 6. I knew that building the way you know your own house, every sound it made, every door that stuck, every light that flickered, every corner that stayed dark no matter how many times you flipped the switch. I was not an anxious person. I was not someone who spooked easily. I had worked nights for years before Hargrove, warehouses, hospitals, a university campus. I was used to empty spaces. But Hargrove was different. It took me about 2 weeks to figure out why. The building was too quiet.
Every building has a baseline sound. HVAC, pipes, elevators settling, the subtle creaks of a structure responding to temperature changes overnight. Hargrove had all of that, but it also had something else. About 3 weeks into my shifts, I started noticing a sound I couldn't place. It happened between 1 and 2 a.m., always in that window. Always when I was on the upper floors doing my second walk. It was a sound like movement, not footsteps exactly, more like the sound of weight shifting, like someone adjusting in a chair or rolling slowly across a floor. The first time I heard it, I stopped walking and stood completely still for 2 minutes. Nothing else, just that one sound, and then silence. I logged it as building settling, possible HVAC variants, and moved on. The second time, 4 nights later, I heard it again. Same floor, floor 14, same time, around 1:15 in the morning. This time it lasted longer, maybe 10 seconds of that slow rolling sound. And then, and I wrote this in my log because I needed to document it, and then what sounded like a single footstep. One footstep, then nothing. I stood in that hallway for a long time that night. I told myself it was the building. Old buildings make sounds. I had been in that building for almost a month and nothing had happened. I finished my walk and went back to the desk. But I started paying attention to floor 14 in a way I hadn't before.
Floor 14 was a law firm, Hargrove and Associates, no relation to the building name, just a coincidence that I always found slightly unsettling. Medium-sized firm, maybe 40 employees during the day, open plan, with a cluster of private offices along the east wall. The camera coverage on 14 was good. 4 cameras, one at each end of the main corridor, one covering the open workspace, one covering the hallway leading to the private offices. I had watched those feeds hundreds of times. I knew exactly what floor 14 looked like at 1 in the morning. Empty, dark, still. About 6 weeks into my shifts, a Thursday night, I was doing my upper floor walk and I reached 14 just before 1:20 a.m. I stepped off the elevator and turned on the corridor lights. They flickered. They did that sometimes on 14. The ballast on the 3rd fluorescent panel from the elevator had been failing for weeks. Maintenance had been notified. It was on the list. The lights came on, flickered once more, held. I started my walk down the corridor toward the open workspace. Halfway down the hall, I heard it again. The rolling sound, directly ahead of me. I stopped. The sound stopped. I stood there in that flickering corridor, and I did what you're trained to do. I called out, "Security, is anyone there?" Silence. Then, from somewhere in the darkness of the open workspace ahead, a chair moved. Not the rolling sound, not building noise, a chair, the specific sound of a wheeled office chair moving across a hard floor, a short, deliberate movement. Someone had moved a chair, and then complete silence again.
My hand went to my radio before I had consciously decided to reach for it. I called down to the monitoring company we were contracted with, told them I had a possible presence on 14, asked them to check the camera feeds. 30 seconds of silence on the radio. Then the operator came back and said, 14 looks clear on all 4 feeds, no movement detected. I told him I had just heard a chair move in the open workspace. Another pause. He said, "Guard, our cameras are showing an empty floor. You want me to call it in to the supervisor?" I stood there in that hallway and I made a decision that I have replayed in my mind many times since. I said, "No, don't call it in. I'll check it myself." I don't know why I said that. Maybe I didn't want to look foolish if it turned out to be nothing. Maybe I was just stubborn. Maybe, and this is what I believe now, maybe some part of me already knew that whatever was in that room wasn't something a supervisor's phone call was going to resolve. I walked into the open workspace. I turned on every light I could find. Empty desks, computer screens dark, papers in neat stacks, the normal aftermath of a workday, coffee cups left on desks, a jacket hanging on the back of a chair, a pair of reading glasses next to a keyboard, and in the center of the room, slightly apart from the desk it belonged to, one chair, rolled out at an angle, like someone had just stood up. I checked every desk, every cubicle divider, the supply closet at the back of the room, empty. I went to the hallway leading to the private offices, checked every office, every one unlocked, checked them all. Empty. I stood in that empty room next to that moved chair, and I felt something I had not felt in 3 years of night work. I felt watched.
I went back to the desk and I pulled up every camera feed from the previous 2 hours. I watched footage from floor 14, all 4 cameras, from 11 p.m. forward. Cameras 1, 2, and 4, nothing. Empty floor, no movement. Camera 3, the one covering the hallway to the private offices, had gone to static at 12:47 a.m. Not offline, not a black screen, static. It had been showing a normal empty hallway, and then at 12:47 it had switched to static, And at 1:23 a.m., 6 minutes after I had been on that floor, it had come back to a normal feed. 36 minutes of static, exactly covering the window of time when I had heard the sounds. I sat at that desk and I stared at that timestamp for a long time. Equipment malfunctions, cameras go to static, it happens. But it had happened only on that camera, only on that floor, only during that exact window. I wrote it in the log. I noted the chair. I noted the static. I noted the sounds I had heard on multiple occasions. And I went back upstairs at 3 a.m. for my final walk. I don't know why I went back. I should have just logged it and let the morning supervisor deal with it. That would have been the sensible thing, but I went back. Floor 14 at 3 a.m. I stepped off the elevator. The corridor lights came on. Steadier this time, no flicker. I walked to the open workspace, hit the lights. Everything exactly as I had left it 2 hours ago, including the chair, still rolled out at that angle. I walked to the hallway of private offices, and I stopped. The last office on the left, corner office, belonged to one of the senior partners. I had checked it 2 hours ago, and it was dark and empty. The light was on. Not overhead lights, the desk lamp, the small lamp on the partner's desk. It was on. I know for a fact it was not on 2 hours ago. I had checked that office. I had pushed the door open, swept it with my flashlight, confirmed empty, moved on. The lamp was not on at 1 a.m. It was on now. I stood in that hallway, and I did not move for what felt like a very long time. Then I walked to that office door. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Empty. Desk lamp on. Chair pushed back from the desk, and on the desk, a legal pad. Yellow paper, the kind that firm used for handwritten notes. There was writing on it. I had checked that desk at 1 a.m. The legal pad had been blank. I remembered it specifically because the pen resting on it had caught the light from my flashlight. Now there was writing on it. 3 words, written in deliberate, careful handwriting. I will not repeat what those 3 words were. I will tell you that I have not worked a night shift in a building since that night. I will tell you that the words were addressed to me, to my name, my actual name, and that I had never met anyone in that building, had never introduced myself to any of the daytime staff, and wore a uniform that said only the name of the security company. Not my name, just the company name. Whoever wrote those words knew who I was. I called my supervisor from the elevator on the way down. I called the monitoring company. I called building management's emergency line. By 4 a.m., there were 3 people in that building with me. My supervisor, a building manager, and a police officer who had been nearby on patrol. They went through every inch of that building. No one found any person, no sign of forced entry, no evidence of anyone having been in the building that night besides me. The police officer photographed the legal pad, took it as evidence. The building manager confirmed that the writing was not there when he had last been on that floor 2 days prior. He did not recognize the handwriting. My supervisor looked at the camera static log. He looked at the chair. He looked at where the lamp had been found on. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, These things happen in old buildings. You probably didn't notice the lamp when you came through the first time. I told him I had checked that office. I told him the lamp was off. He said, "It was probably on and you missed it." I resigned 3 days later. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. I've thought about the rolling sound, the footstep, the chair, the static that began and ended with precise timing, the lamp, the legal pad, and the 3 words. The rational explanations all fall apart under examination. Someone in the building. How did they get in? How did they leave without being seen? How did they know my name? Equipment malfunction. Why only that camera? Why only that window? I missed the lamp. I did not miss the lamp. I have no explanation that satisfies me. What I have is this. In 3 years of night work before Hargrove, I never once felt that a building aware of me. I never once felt watched in an empty room. I never once left a shift and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I felt calm enough to drive. That building knew I was there. I don't know what else to call it. I don't know how to frame it in a way that sounds anything other than what it sounds like. That building knew I was there. And on that night, for whatever reason, it decided to let me know. I drive past that building sometimes. I can't help it. It's on a route I take to see my parents on weekends. I never look up at the 14th floor. But every time I pass it, every single time, I get that feeling. That low, quiet feeling. Like something in that building is watching my car drive by and waiting for me to come back.